Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into something massive. We're talking about one of the most profound mysteries of all time, the actual true purpose of our existence. Think about it. Before time, before space, before the galaxies even existed, what was the plan? We're going to unpack the grand philosophy of creation based on Islamic sources. And then we're going to see exactly how this cosmic test plays out in real life through one of the most epic, dramatic, historical events ever recorded. I'm talking about the story of Prophet Musa, or Moses.
So, a natural question always pops up when we think about the sheer scale of the universe. Did Allah create all of this because he needed to? Well, the sources are crystal clear on this one. Absolutely not. Before the heavens and the earth, there was only Allah, who is entirely self-sufficient. He didn't create the universe out of loneliness or because he needed worshippers. If every single human just vanished tomorrow, his greatness wouldn't decrease by a single fraction. Instead, everything, from the most massive galaxy down to a tiny grain of sand, was created out of perfect, deliberate wisdom.
Okay, let's dive into this, because if we really want to understand our purpose, we have to completely redefine one specific word. When you hear the word worship, what comes to mind? You probably picture ritual prayer, right? But in Islam, the concept of ibadah, or worship, is just vastly broader than that. It's an entire way of life. It literally means that every single thing you do, whether that's speaking the truth, doing honest business, taking care of your parents, or even just offering a genuine smile to a stranger, all of it becomes a profound act of worship when you do it with a sincere intention.
This is where it gets really fascinating. Let's look at where we actually fit into this whole grand design. Take the angels, for example. They're in constant obedience, they don't get hungry or tired, and they completely lack free will. They do exactly what they're commanded to do. But humans, along with another creation called jinn, were handed this massive, heavy responsibility, the burden of choice. The simple ability to choose between right and wrong is exactly what gives our actions meaning. Without choice, obedience doesn't mean much, does it? In fact, Iblis, or Satan, was a jinn who used his free will to choose pure arrogance over submission. And that brings us right to the absolute core of why we're here on Earth. This world, it's not our permanent home. It's literally an examination hall. The Qur'an states it so clearly. Life and death were created to test which of us is best in deeds. And notice it says best, not most. It's about quality and sincerity. Every single person is handed a totally unique temporary test. For some people, that test is handling immense wealth without becoming corrupt. For others, it's navigating poverty. Some are tested with great health, while others are tested with devastating hardship. All right, so the crucial takeaway here is that we are all, right now, sitting in that examination hall. But what does this actually look like in action? Let's move from the grand philosophy of why we exist to the ultimate historical case study. We're going to look at two men who represent the absolute extreme ends of this test. Prophet Musa, who submitted entirely to the Creator, and Pharaoh, the ultimate tyrant of Egypt. Let's start with Pharaoh. If this worldly life is a test, this guy is the archetype of someone failing it spectacularly. Blinded by his massive temporary empire, his insane architecture, and all his wealth, he literally stood up and declared, "I am your highest lord." Talk about an ego trip. And terrified by a prophecy that a child born to the enslaved Israelites would eventually overthrow his reign, this tyrant went to the darkest, most horrifying extreme possible. He ordered the massacre of every newborn boy in the entire community. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is the sheer, brilliant irony of it all. Worldly power cannot ever stop divine will, period. To save her baby, Musa's mother is inspired to trust Allah completely and place him in a basket right on the Nile River. And guess where the river takes him? Straight to his enemy's front door. Pharaoh's own wife, Asya, finds him and adopts him. So the tyrant literally ends up paying to raise and feed the very child destined to dismantle his entire empire. From fleeing to Midian later on after accidentally killing an oppressive Egyptian, to finally receiving prophethood at Mount Tur, every single step of Musa's life was flawlessly, divinely orchestrated. So now, Musa and his brother Harun are tasked with heading back to confront the single most powerful ruler on the planet. But they don't roll up with massive armies or piles of gold. Instead, they are armed with profound divine signs. Musa is given two undeniable miracles to prove who sent him: a simple wooden staff that can transform into a massive, terrifying living snake, and his own hand, which, when he pulls it out from his collar, glows with a radiant, blinding white light. When these two finally face off, it is the ultimate clash of paradigms. Pharaoh is relying completely on his military might, his royal status, and this total illusion of control. Musa, on the other hand, is relying 100% on the unseen creator. When Musa confidently presents his message and demonstrates his miracles, Pharaoh just laughs it off. He dismisses it as mere magic tricks. And to prove his point, he summons the absolute greatest magicians in all of Egypt to publicly humiliate Musa. And the showdown that follows? Honestly, it's legendary. Thousands of people gather around. The magicians go first, casting their ropes and staffs, creating this massive, terrifying optical illusion of slithering snakes everywhere. But then Musa simply throws down his wooden staff. It transforms into a real, massive snake and completely swallows up every single one of their illusions. Now, these magicians are the top experts in trickery, so they instantly recognize the difference between human sleight of hand and actual divine power. In a massive turning point, they immediately fall down in prostration, submitting to Allah right then and there. Pharaoh goes crazy, threatening them with brutal executions, but they don't care. They willingly choose to face death rather than lose their eternal souls. Talk about passing the test. But Pharaoh's arrogance, completely unbroken. So Allah sends a series of devastating, undeniable signs to humble the entire empire. Egypt gets slammed. We're talking severe famine and drought, devastating storms, massive swarms of locusts, lice, frogs, and the waters of the mighty Nile literally turning to blood. And here's the kicker. After every single plague hits, Pharaoh begs Musa to pray for relief, promising he'll finally free the Israelites. But the absolute second the plague lifts, boom, he breaks his promise. Every time. Finally, Musa is commanded to lead his people out of Egypt in the dead of night. They make a run for it. But by morning, Pharaoh realizes they're gone, and he and his massive, fully armed military are in hot pursuit. The Israelites find themselves trapped at the edge of the Red Sea. They've got an ocean in front of them and a raging, bloodthirsty army closing in fast from behind. Panic sets in. They're crying out, thinking it's totally over. But in that absolute cinematic, terrifying moment, Musa doesn't flinch. He displays this unwavering faith, declaring, "Indeed, my Lord is with me. He will guide me." And then, the impossible happens. Musa strikes the water with his staff, and the sea literally parts. The water stands up like massive, towering mountains on either side, creating a totally dry path right down the middle for the Israelites to cross. Blinded by pure rage and arrogance, Pharaoh orders his army to charge right into the sea after them. But once Musa and his people are safely on the other side, the waters just crash back down. The greatest empire on earth drowns in an instant. In his final moments, seeing unavoidable death right in front of him, Pharaoh actually tries to repent. But that last-minute realization, it's rejected. It came way too late. His exam time was officially up. Now, you'd think that after witnessing the ocean literally split in half, these people would have rock-solid, unshakable faith, right? Well, escaping physical slavery was only half the battle. Their internal, spiritual test was really just beginning, and sadly, a lot of them failed it. While Musa was away on Mount Tor receiving the Torah, a guy named Samari actually convinced them to build and worship a golden calf. Later on, they flat out refused to enter the Holy Land because they were too scared of the people living there, completely forgetting the divine power that just saved them. As a direct result of that cowardice and disobedience, they were condemned to wander the desert for 40 long years.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive, vital lesson about how we view the tests in our own lives. Musa himself actually goes through this profound learning experience with a super wise servant of Allah, known as Al-Khidr. Khidr does 3 things that make 0 sense. He damages a poor man's boat, he takes the life of a young boy, and he builds a wall for a totally hostile, rude town for free. To our limited human brains, this seems incredibly unjust, right? But the divine reality reveals a completely different picture. He damaged the boat so a tyrant king wouldn't confiscate it. The boy would have grown up to ruthlessly destroy his righteous parents. And the wall? It was protecting a hidden inheritance for 2 innocent orphans. It just proves that we are totally blind to the grand, perfect wisdom working behind the scenes of what we often think are senseless tragedies.
Let's take a quick look at another guy from Musa's time, Qarun. This guy was granted unimaginable, ridiculous wealth. But instead of being humbled and grateful, he became wildly arrogant. He walked around claiming all his riches were purely the result of his own brilliant intellect and capability. He failed his specific test of wealth so spectacularly that the earth was actually commanded to swallow him and all of his treasures completely whole, to swallow it up. It's a pretty stark reminder that your wealth is just another test. It is definitely not a measure of your worth. All right, let's zoom out for a second and see how all of this builds into the bigger picture. We've talked a lot about history, but now let's look at the grand sequence of existence. Think of this as the exact roadmap for every single human soul. This includes Musa, this includes Pharaoh, and yes, it includes you and me. Right now, we're in phase 1, earthly life. It's just the temporary testing ground. But as the sources constantly remind us, every single soul will taste death, which moves us right along to the next stages. So that next stage is called barzakh. You see, death is really just a transition. It is absolutely not the end. Barzakh is this intermediate realm in the grave, sitting between our life now and the day of judgment. This is where the soul gets its very first true realization of how it did on the test. Based on your earthly deeds, it becomes either a peaceful, beautiful window looking into paradise, or a really harsh preview of suffering for those who knowingly rejected the truth. Eventually, the universe as we know it is going to end, triggering the final judgment. First up is resurrection, where literally billions of souls are gathered together. Then, every single person is handed their book of deeds, and I mean an exact, flawless record of every word you spoke, every action you took, and every intention you hid. Next, the scale of justice weighs all of it with absolute perfect fairness, right before the final terrifying crossing over the bridge, As-Sirat. When you really think about this grand sequence, you quickly realize that worldly wealth, status, titles, all the stuff Pharaoh and Qarun killed themselves chasing mean absolutely nothing here. Which brings us right down to the ultimate contrast of our explainer today. The whole world is screaming at you that success is about your bank account, your fame, your power, and your job title. But as we've seen, all of that is temporary. Literally, all of it turns to dust. True success, the kind of success that actually survives the parting of oceans and outlasts the end of the universe, is meeting the Creator with a sincere heart and a record of righteous deeds. True success is entirely about how you respond to your specific test of free will. It's the test Musa passed with flying colors and the test Pharaoh so miserably failed. So, as we wrap up this incredible journey together from way before the creation of the stars, all the way down to the dramatic shores of the Red Sea, we're left with really the only question that truly matters. One day, your earthly test is going to conclude. The exam will be over and the pens will be lifted. So, knowing what you know now, how are you going to spend the life entrusted to you? Take a serious moment to think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.